Thank you, Ahmed. Yeah, like Ahmed said, I do comms at New Harvest. I have been kind of interested in cell ag for a very long time since I stumbled upon the concept of cultured meat in kind of the bowels of some animal rights internet forum, to be honest, somewhere in middle school. And I've been following the field and participating ever since. And I'm really grateful to continue working at New Harvest. So I will kind of let the panelists each introduce themselves. I think everyone of the attendees, and looking, there are a lot of familiar names, are probably familiar with your company. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about what you do at your company and how you came to where you are in your introduction. So maybe Daan can start.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having us and listening to us at this panel. My name is Daan Luining. I'm from the Netherlands. My background is in cell molecular biology, and I have been in cultivated meat for the past 7 years now. I started my career in academia in the lab of Professor Mark Post, where I was part of the team that made the very first laboratory-grown hamburger. So really so excited to see this field being growing for the past 7 years, going from this pretty unknown, obscure field to now a world phenomenon where actually products are on the market. I also was part of New Harvest, where I led the research and I was part of founding the fellowship program, and where I also know Meera very well from. We worked together in New York. And during my time there, met my other co-founder, Mark Kotter and Klein de Noot, and you're utilizing a unique technology for stem cell differentiation to do scalable, affordable production of cultured meat.
Great. David, do you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. My name is David Kay. I am the Senior Manager of Communications at Memphis Meats. I've been with the company for about 5 years now, so I got in very early on when we were still at Indie Bio, the startup incubator. And my role really focuses on communications, PR, and policy. In fact, I'll be talking later today about more of the policy realm and AMPS innovation. But really excited to be here. So thank you all for attending.
Yeah, I met David for the first time at New Harvest's 2016 conference, which was in San Francisco.
I remember, yeah, that was a vintage event.
Yeah, Daan was there too, actually. So
yeah, I made the backdrop at the time still, which was a nightmare, but it turned out really great.
Yep, he was also our bouncer. Anyway, Lee, would you like to go next?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Ahmed, and thank you, Meera, for having me. I'm probably the newbie in this panel. My name is Recht. I'm head of sustainability at Aleph Farms. We're located in Israel, and we are cultivating beef steaks. The reason why we have a head of sustainability is because the focus is really on not only creating a delicious product that is healthy, but also extremely sustainable in all different aspects, and I can talk about it a little bit more while we move forward. My background is also in biotechnology. I have a PhD in biotechnology, and I've been working in the last 6-7 years on how to promote sustainability through innovation, working with startups, corporates. I'm excited to be here.
Great. So now that everyone is introduced, I'm going to start with kind of the obvious topic, which is COVID-19. So I think that we've all been familiar with the importance of cell ag in building resiliency into the food system even prior to the pandemic. But now I think there's kind of more of a popular understanding of the fragility of our food system. Not that many people were thinking about these kind of epidemic outbreaks before with regard to our food. So I'm kind of curious for each of you how the pandemic has impacted your conversations with others and how you feel others have responded to your technology, like in light of the pandemic. So I kind of have specific questions for each of you, like Daan, for example. So you're focused on cell-based pork, and so while we have this human pandemic, there's also the lesser known but still grave pandemic of African swine flu. So I was curious if those two have kind of overlapped in your talking points, if you feel people are more open to your technology now that they understand the pandemic from a personal level. I'll let you kind of talk.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you mentioned the swine flu pandemic. I think it now has reached Germany, where now new cases are coming up every day, and it is really frightening to see this spreading so fast. Apparently it's very virulent, and in the past, I think 2 years, over 150 million pigs were cultured in China, which we here in Europe didn't hear much about, but now news is breaking out that this is happening here as well. And just the need for a more sustainable local production method has come up, especially also when we see a similar thing happening in America, where we in the Netherlands as well had a huge amount of infections in slaughterhouses, where these people are being put in conditions very close to one another and not necessarily very healthy and right working environments. So all these aspects are coming now up, and I think it's so interesting to see that suddenly, besides a global pandemic, animal pandemics, which we had before, we had, I think, quite some, especially England is quite famous for hoof and mouth disease, but we had many more before that. And for some reason, only the urgency is coming up now. And I think this is the right moment. I think we're just riding this wave where attention for climate, attention for animal welfare, attention for environment, and now another aspect, which is pandemic, but also animal pandemics are coming up and being more prevalent. It's just the right moment in time for this field to flourish, I think. And I think we've seen in conversation that people are understanding more what we're doing, and the need for it became more apparent. So yeah, I do think COVID has opened up new avenues for us and make the conversation a little bit easier when it comes to these new ideas and new ways of producing food.
Yeah, here in the US, pig producers were able to respond so quickly to the COVID outbreak because they already had a pandemic playbook for the inevitable outbreak of African swine fever for whenever it reaches US soil. And so that's how they were able to respond so quickly. They literally just took the same bullet points from previous PowerPoint slides and applied them here. So I'm curious, David, from kind of a communications perspective, is pandemic and pandemic prevention technologies featuring more in Memphis's comms plan now?
Yeah, I think a few things. One, I would just start by saying, obviously this pandemic has really been a challenge across the world. And I think, as a society, we owe a debt of gratitude to those who are first responders, essential employees, in particular those who are working in the food industry to help make sure people can still have access to high quality food during this time. But yeah, I do think, the pandemic has exposed some vulnerabilities in the food supply chain and in the meat supply chain in particular. And I do think there is room to talk about some of this stuff. One of the things that we've been thinking about is what can cell-based meat mean for the future pandemic risk. We think there's a potential here to reduce pandemic risk, whether it's a viral pandemic, because we won't need to stock large herds of animals in a really dense way in our supply chain. For bacterial pandemics, because we're not expecting to use antibiotics at scale. And then also, I think just to diversify the meat supply chain so that we can be better equipped to deal with the repercussions of future pandemics if they happen. Knock on wood, hopefully they don't. Address things and reduce the risk of meat shortages and the associated worker safety issues that come with those. So I do think there's definitely a role for cell-based meat to play in offering a solution to reducing the risk of the pandemic, of future pandemics, and also helping address some of the negative side effects of those pandemics when they do occur.
Thank you, David. Lee, were pandemics and kind of zoonotic outbreaks part of Aleph's sustainability kind of portfolio prior to COVID? I haven't heard much about pandemics in sustainability conversations prior to now. So I was curious kind of how that fit in your timeline.
Yeah, sure. So Actually, we've established a very core sustainability strategy within the company prior to the pandemic. But actually what we feel is that COVID-19 has really just gave us the extra push that we needed to move forward with it. I mean, in the end, how we look at it is that it is clear that moving forward, we need to create food systems that are sustainable and resilient. And that's something that hasn't been occurring in the last few decades, and we need to make sure that they start occurring more and more. And I think all the corporates are understanding it, and now also the young companies are seeing how they can create that as well. The way we look at it, I mean, once the pandemic hit also, I mean, worldwide, beyond the fact that this is very challenging, as David was mentioning, but we really do feel like we're on the right side of the change. And I think that we can all share that feeling, that there needs to be a change. And in a lot of ways, the pandemic is being mentioned as some kind of, you know, dressing rehearsal to climate change and to climate events that will occur. So a whole issue regarding risk management that includes environmental and social aspects in your risk management are critical and crucial for this as well. Aleph Farms puts a really strong aspect in sustainability. We have a very comprehensive strategy. It includes different aspects regarding environment, social, health and nutrition, which all of those includes also different ways of looking at the pandemic, and of course an economic aspect of sustainability as well. So I can talk further, but maybe a little later on.
Well, I am curious because I think we all think of our cell-based meat companies as like a sustainable agriculture company to an extent. So what does it mean for a already sustainable or sustainability oriented company to have a head of sustainability?
So the idea is here is that when we're looking at an alternative to the protein or to the production, that's already going to put us, it's positioning us in a sustainability aspect. Just because we're, you know, a sustainable product, we're coming versus a very unsustainable industry, and that kind of is clear. But in the end, we're going to be an independent food system of our own. We're going to be manufacturing our own food, and we need to be accountable on the way we want to create our food system without being compared to any other industry. So looking forward and how we want to impact the environment, how we want to impact the communities, the local communities, the farmers, the livestock farmers, how we want to create our food and what kind of nutrition accessibility we want to have, and food security aspects. So all of these are already beyond the aspects of just being cultivated meat. It's really also looking into us as a food system and how we want to create that food system. So in our strategy, we look at it, like I said, in 4 different ways, where we have 4 pillars that are building our strategy. With the environment, we are incorporating circularity and recyclability. We're incorporating transition to renewable energies. We've declared about 6 months ago that we're going to be carbon neutral by 2025 in our operations, and carbon neutral in the full supply chain by 2030. But also, of course, carbon is only one part of our environmental sustainability. We also think about water and chemicals and land and biodiversity and how we can impact that. So we're giving back to the planet while we are creating our food. And then we have social sustainability, where we're really looking at how we can work together with the communities, together with the farmers, and make sure that we are taking care of the people within the planet. It doesn't matter where they're coming from. So it's really important for us that when we enter the market, we're not creating a fear among the meat industry and the livestock farmers that there is not a place for them. And actually, we want to see how we can work together alongside them. And then, of course, the economic aspects is making sure that we're affordable and that we're creating a resilient supply chain, where we can really make sure that we are taking care of being able to bring access to everybody. So, I mean, that's a really important part.
Great. You mentioned partnerships a lot just then, and I was going to ask this later, but I'm curious, how do you feel a up and coming sustainability oriented company can cohesively, or is it coherent to work with big, like there are farmers, there are small farmers, and there are big farmers, and there are companies like Tyson and Cargill, and that's the majority of farming probably that really happens. And is it really compatible to run a sustainable cultured meat company and have partnerships with these big meat companies who I think many and consumers would be wary of them as just kind of opportunistically trying to make money off of protein and not really like, pay penance for their role in contributing to climate change, pandemics, et cetera, in the first place.
Is this to me or to?
I'm kind of curious for everyone. Maybe David can start. I know that Tyson invested in Memphis at some point, so I was curious if from a communications perspective, you are worried about consumer backlash to that.
Yeah, so we have Tyson Foods as well as Cargill have both invested in Memphis Meats. And generally, I should say, we've had other partnerships with folks in the existing meat industry. We've signed regulatory related letters with the North American Meat Institute. We're members of the American Meat Science Association. We're members of the International Association for Food Protection. Our approach from the beginning has really been that these sorts of collaborations are not only good, but necessary for achieving the sort of food system that I think everybody at this conference is hoping for. The reality is, I think it's going to take both the innovative mindset of upstarts like us with the wisdom and experience and scale of these larger existing corporates. And I think there is, frankly, a lot of common ground. I do think that, maybe we don't agree on everything, but I think we all agree that it's important that we are enabling our food system to meet skyrocketing demand for meat. And I think that there are lots of opportunities. I've ticked off a few in terms of, I've talked about investment and regulatory partnerships. Going forward, I think there could be partnerships in terms of product development and distribution and marketing. And certainly, once all of our companies are selling products, there'll need to be partnerships with restaurants and grocery stores and cafeterias and others in the food service sector. And so I do think this sort of collaboration is entirely necessary. And that's really been our approach from the beginning. How can we build a big tent is the term that we like to use at Memphis Meats. How can we make sure we're being inclusive and we're finding ways where we can connect on areas of common ground and really move the ball forward together.
Thank you. Daan, what do you think?
Yeah, I can only agree with David here, since the meat industry has been around for a long time, and the complete aspects from an animal to eventually a store-bought product, those are things that they have experience with for many decades already. And throwing that aside just because they were feeding a industry that we now don't agree with anymore doesn't seem very fair. And especially now, if we can utilize their experience for something good or better, I think we should leave the door open and, like Dave said, maybe make a tent big enough where everybody can fit inside, where we can help each other, changing the way that we're doing things right now. And they seem very willing to do so, else they wouldn't be sitting at the table, right? And to see that as maybe paying off the damage that they've done, I don't think so. I think they're just also seeing the damage and the unsustainable nature of their business and now trying to shift away from that to something more sustainable. And I think, yeah, we can use all the help from them we can get. So that's yeah, I think that's a good thing.
Lee, how does Aleph approach partnerships with existing livestock producers and meat companies?
So similar to David, Cargill is one of the investors in Aleph Farms, and the way we look at it is that if you really want to look at sustainability, it's an extremely dynamic position. What was sustainable 10 years ago is not going to be sustainable today necessarily, and might not be sustainable in another 20 years. And we need to see, to be sustainable, we really need to work all of us together with all approaches Aleph Farm approaches this as cultivated meat. We are entering the market. We're not trying to replace the meat industry. We are trying to be part of the meat industry. And to be part of that meat industry, to be part of that transition and that shift, we need to work in partnership with the existing meat industry. There's no, I mean, the way we look at it, if we start shaming the industry, and we have to understand that a lot of people within that industry are people that are working to support their family, to provide. So you need to approach this in a way where we can work together and make sure that we are changing, we are transitioning to more sustainable and resilient ways of producing food in general, and also meat, because meat is, as Daan was saying, this is something that is historically in our nutrition, and it's very, very critical and important for many, many people. And we have to take that in consideration. We can't just deny that people want meat. So the way we're approaching it is that absolutely we think it is important that we work with the meat industry. We're very sensitive about it. We have specific demands and specific ways that we want to work, and we want to make sure that we're doing it as part of a transition to more sustainable and resilient food system. That is definitely where we put it, and we absolutely believe that there is existing infrastructure that is happening. There's a lot of experience and knowledge sharing that needs to take place, and that's how we see the way we want to collaborate. It doesn't mean that we're going to collaborate with everything that they're doing. We absolutely not. But if we want to make that change comes from inside. Okay, so that's the way we look at it.
Great, thank you. Yeah, from my perspective, I attended the American Meat Science Association's kind of annual big convention last year. And it was probably my favorite event out of all of the conferences I've gone to. And it was full of just a bunch of really nerdy meat scientists who were so interested in what we were doing. They all like crowded around our fellows that presented after, and it was a very warm and hospitable environment. But okay, so to take a little bit of a different approach, I'll do a minor plug for New Harvest, but last week we announced that Robert Downey Jr. is our newest donor, and specifically what he's funding is our newest safety initiative. So to work with a bunch of companies to figure out what data needs to be generated to establish the safety of cultured meat. And obviously that's kind of an adjacent issue to regulation. So I'm curious where each of you are with working with your company's regulators. Maybe we can go back to David.
Yeah, our approach to regulation has really been engage early and often. So one of our early hires was a former FDA regulator, a guy named Eric Schulze, who I'm sure many at this conference are familiar with. And we have really tried to engage very early on. The state of regulation in the US, and I'll talk a little bit more about this actually in my talk later today, but both the USDA and the FDA will have jurisdiction over cell-based meat in the US. For meat and poultry. For seafood, it's a little bit different. And in March of 2019, they outlined in a joint agreement in broad strokes what that oversight will look like, with FDA taking cell collection, growth and differentiation, as well as the pre-market safety assessment, and then the transfer of jurisdiction happening at the point of harvest, at which point USDA takes over and handles any additional processing that needs to happen and labeling and things like that. And so from our perspective, I think the agencies have been doing a really good job. They've been very open. They've been moving very quickly. And I think they've recognized that, you know, in the case of the US specifically, the US has historically been one of the world leaders in terms of food and agriculture. And if we want to maintain that position in the world, it's really important to have a regulatory system for cell-based meat that is fair, safe, and transparent. So I think they've been acting quickly. They've been acting in ways that make sense to us. You know, they've been, I think, really valuable stakeholders in this whole process.
Thank you, David. Lee, I'm curious what the regulation is like in Israel, and then also if you want to speak to, obviously, I think everyone's heard that the Israeli Prime Minister recently tried your steak. How did that happen? Did he come to you? Did you go to him? What's kind of the deal there?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, agreed with David, absolutely. We are in touch with all the regulatory agencies worldwide. There is a very positive movement towards regulating cultivated meat, and we're part of that discussion. We really look at them as partners, and we want to help each other achieve the right regulation. So that's just in a general. Israel, of course, we're in touch with the Israeli regulatory agency as well. Israel is a very small market, and one of the reasons why, so last week the Prime Minister came to Aleph farms to taste our cultivated beefsteak. And this is the first world leader coming to taste a cultivated beefsteak, cultivated meat in general. And the truth is, the reason why he came, first of all, this was an initiation of the Good Food Institute that in Israel, located in Israel, that was trying to promote just looking at Israel as an innovation hub and understanding how we can leverage that innovation hub just in general and take all these companies and innovation that's occurring in Israel and promote a whole framework that's going to happen in Israel regarding R&D and job opportunities, food security, climate change. I mean, there are so many benefits when we're promoting alternative proteins and cultivated meat specifically. So yeah, well, that was one of the main reasons for us. I mean, we are absolutely all about economic security, but we're also very much promoting food security in environmental matters. And we believe that having the government come to be part of the discussion is crucial to move forward in creating the right ways to move, creating food systems just in general, having policies, having the large institutes, financial institutes, corporates, and the young startups and innovation academia or companies work together.
Great. And then Daan, what's the regulation or regulatory system like in the Netherlands? And do you work with other companies, or is that kind of on a company by company basis? How are things going?
Yeah, so the Netherlands, of course, is quite unique since it's the birthplace of cultivated meat. And so very early on, I think our government has to take a stance on this and has to start thinking about what this actually means. Of course, the Netherlands is part of the European Union, where we have the European Food and Safety Authority regulating new types of food products coming to market. But of course, the Netherlands is a member in the parliament, and they have a vote and at least have a say in how these things are going to be regulated. Like I think everybody, we have taken a very early step towards regulators asking what their stance is, and we have done quite some work on the Dutch front, where now cultivated meat is being taken up in what they call the Dutch protein strategy, which means that we are moving away from traditional sources of protein and now diversifying that, and now cultivated meat being flagged as one of a very promising innovation that is currently happening that should be supported. And this is also then what we're seeing. We had multiple visits of Parliament. I think we also have been reaching out to the EFSA and having a good response from them. So I think most regulators around the world are getting ready for this. And of course, not necessarily that Europe is going to be our first jurisdiction to apply. You can do that anywhere as soon as you know what the regulatory framework would look like. But Europe is unique in the sense that they had very early on already a framework in place. So if you go in the EFSA laws, there's already a clause that stipulates or talks about cultivated meat or cell-based production of protein. So this was quite interesting to see that really forward-thinking, already putting down some rules, but now, of course, waiting for the first application and to see how they're going to deal with that is a thing that we've been waiting on. And to be fair, it's a bit more stringent than, I think that's what everybody says, is a bit more stringent than the rest of the other jurisdictions. There's just more proof points since they've been a bit skeptic to new products in Europe, not only cultivated meat, but in general. So we're really hoping to see a shift, especially now during these times, a shift in an attitude towards this, and hopefully a helping hand in getting this to market.
Thank you, Daan. I'm going to move to some of the audience submitted questions now. The first, since we're talking about regulation, is why is the regulatory framework different for seafood? I don't know, none of you are working on seafood, so I don't know if you can answer, but I'll open it up.
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. So we are actually doing meat, poultry, and seafood at Memphis Meats. This distinction is specific to the U.S. I think in other geographic regions it may not be the case. But the reason seafood, so first I should say, the way in which seafood differs from meat and poultry in most cases is that it will be regulated entirely by the FDA. There are some exceptions like catfish where that will still be split between FDA and USDA. But the reason that in most cases seafood, cell-based seafood will be regulated just by FDA is simply because that is how conventionally produced seafood is regulated. And so, the USDA regulates conventionally produced meat and poultry in the US, and the FDA regulates conventionally produced seafood. And so there was a desire to, in the interest of making sure the regulatory playing field was fair, of just making sure that there was consistency between the conventional counterparts and the cell-based counterparts.
Great, thank you. That was very clarifying. Another person has a question about mad cow disease. Are any of you concerned about mad cow disease? And if so, how would you prevent it or mitigate that risk? Lee?
Sure, I'll take it. So the concept of, first of all, we're very much aware of all the different diseases that occur. One of the advantages in cultivated meat in general is the fact that we have a very controlled atmosphere of how we grow our meat, and that allows us to control a lot of different kinds of, avoid a lot of different kinds of either diseases or need for antibiotics, by the way. So yes, we are aware. We are, just like all the other pandemics that are now occurring, these are part of a general high-level risk management that we're taking part of. But we have actually created, through this technology, a resilient way of producing our meat that doesn't have to, that can overcome these kinds of typical diseases and issues.
Thank you. This next question is coming from me. No one actually submitted this, but Daan, I know that Meatable recently did kind of a website or like a redesign of your identity. And so I was curious if you could talk a little bit about the thought process behind why you made what changes you made. And specifically, I noticed that you put out a video. It was a very nice video, but it was narrated by someone with, I think, an American accent and not yourself. I was curious why you may have made that decision.
So as you can see, the outcome of the rebranding behind me, as the virtual background shows. I'm a scientist with my background, and I really enjoy and I'm enthusiastic about that side of cultivated meat. But I understand that this eventually should be appetizing and should end up in somebody's plate. And then the shift going from a lab and science environment to what we call then the barbecue scale, that you shift from there, I think is necessary to engage with an audience that is not necessarily as interested in the technology behind this field, but more about the culinary aspect of it. And I think that group is much bigger. So that's why rebranding and especially the excellent work that Koto Studios has done. I think the phrase "the new natural," especially now, is more relevant than ever. I just think it was time to move away from a lab environment and step into the culinary side, and that's why we have chosen to work together with them. The Voice, they're a British organization, so they made the decision to find a voice artist to help with making the video. We have been getting a lot of nice feedback from people on the website. I think it looks really nice, and I do think it really conveys the message better, saying, this is a new food that is coming. It's not going to be made in a lab. That's just the environment where we are doing the development right now. But finally, this will be just like any other food product that is being produced on a larger scale. So that's why showing that and having that conversation instead of why the technology is so amazing in the environment and linking more that to the environmental aspect of it from the branding side. I think that was just a necessary step, and I think you can probably will see that more and more coming from the industry.
Thank you, Daan. We have several questions about scalability. So I guess to start, Aleph recently showcased a commercial prototype of your cell-based steak. What does it mean for it to be commercial? And does that kind of designation have something to do with scalability? And if so, how?
Absolutely. So, I mean, for us, one of the main challenges and a lot of the resources are now being focused on is how we take our product that we have a product and now we need to move it towards scalability. And this needs to mean process development. This means reducing costs. This means making sure that even in larger scales, we can maintain texture and taste and everything that needs to be about that. So right now we have been in the past year, we've been converting from pretty much an R&D company. We're now building our pilot production and moving forward towards our commercial pilots and of course full commercialization that will occur, I imagine, in the next 4 years. So I mean, we have a very, very intense roadmap so we can come out to the market and we can do it in a scalable way. I mean, for us, that is one of the major, it's also a challenge, but it's also where we're putting a lot of our efforts.
Great, thanks. David, what does kind of scalability mean at Memphis? You all are based in the Bay Area, which is a pretty expensive real estate. So do you imagine your scalable production happening, you know, kind of where big factory farms are in the first place, where land is kind of cheap and widely available? Have you started looking into that kind of thing? Yeah, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, so we started in August construction on our pilot production facility, which will be located in the Bay Area in the East Bay. Which is where Memphis Meats is located in the East Bay. And that is going to be a really important step for us in terms of accomplishing that new level of scale. You know, I think the companies right now in the space are all kind of producing at a bench scale or R&D scale. And obviously to get a more meaningful quantity to start to kind of achieve some of the mission-oriented goals that I know all the companies have will really require scaling up. I do think in the future, one of the exciting things about cell-based meat is the opportunity to provide a more location agnostic production platform than you would see for conventionally produced meat. So we could produce in similar areas that conventionally produced meat is today. That's certainly an option. But also we could produce in dense urban areas where, you know, there's not ready access to arable land, or where the weather conditions typically wouldn't permit meat production, or you know, you name it. There can be all sorts of impediments in a particular geographic region that might prevent that region from making their own food and rely on importing food from other places. And so I do think one of the really exciting potentials for cell-based meat is offering that food security to areas and offering truly localized production, which is one of the things that a lot of our supporters are most excited about.
Great. Daan, I'm going to address this to you because I've heard you talk about this in a previous panel and you had kind of strong opinions. So is it possible we will see at-home cultured products before industrial scale products are feasible or pass regulation?
I think based on the previous conversation that you probably heard me from, I don't think so. Especially just maybe going back to the scalability issue to reference towards, scalability means so many different things to so many people at this moment. Only in the Netherlands by itself, we are eating 2.5 million kilograms of meat every day. The amount of product that is just unimaginable. It's so much every day. So to really go at scale and really to make a dent in meat consumption worldwide, or at least even in the Netherlands, it's going to be such an immense task. But that's, I think, where the tension is for this field. It is an industry ripe for disruption, but I don't see them taking, if you look at those numbers and then saying, well, let's minimize the impact and just going for a personal approach. Because getting people already accustomed to this new product and then also telling them that they can produce this by themselves at home, I think that is maybe 2 steps too far for now. I would rather have it more controlled in a producer that is audited, that has certification, that has quality control management, instead of putting this now already when we're still in such an early developmental stage of this field in the hands of people that are maybe super excited about it, but not necessarily know how to deal with this new product. And I think it needs a little bit more time, and I don't even know if it eventually is possible. Of course, never say never. In 100 years, who knows what might happen, maybe even 50. Everything's moving so fast, but for now, I would be more comfortable, and I see it more realistic in putting this in the hands of people that can be held responsible for what you're producing.
Great. Lee, your newest product is a thin steak. What are your plans for achieving a thicker product?
So actually, the new product that we came out with in our commercial in our pilot that we produced is actually a thicker piece of steak versus our initial product. And we are absolutely moving forward. We have generation 1 and 2, and we have a roadmap of how we want to be able to create absolutely every piece of tissue that we can. For right now, our focus is on creating a thinner piece of steak, but absolutely, future generations include all different kinds of types of meats, and yeah, thicker and tasty. Yep.
Yes, I think we all want thick steak. A number of our research fellows projects are tackling that problem from a number of different angles. So I'm very excited to see how that moves forward. This question, I don't really know what it means, but it's intriguing. Stainless steel technology or single-use production technology?
Stainless steel. Easy.
So,
Yeah, stainless steel.
I can explain the question a little bit, right? Because in the end, evidently, stainless steel or single use is, we're talking about the bioreactors themselves. So do we want to use stainless steel, and then afterwards we need to do what is called cleaning process or sterilizing process, and these are very high level of chemicals and water and energy in general, versus single use, which is putting bioreactors with single use plastic inside the bioreactors. And that way we can avoid the cleaning process and sterilizing process, but then we're using single-use plastic. So each one of them, and on a sustainability point of view, each one of them has a cost, an economic cost, an environmental cost, and also how it adapts as well as possible to the product. There's not one good answer that's clear. I mean, maybe for Daan it is, but there are advantages for both sides. You have to take in consideration that even with stainless steel, there are ways to decarbonize the cleaning processes. With single use today, there are ways to use single use that are more bioplastics. I mean, for every single approach you go, you can look at it and find ways to make it more efficient, more environmental, potentially cheaper. But this is a life in your sustainability aspects. You're constantly in a position where you have alternatives, and you need to choose what is the best alternative. And there's usually, in many cases, a lot of trade-offs, because one is better than the other in one aspect, and then maybe not as good in the other, in a different way. So it's just creating that assessment that's more comprehensive.
Great, thank you. That was a very helpful explanation of the question itself too. We just have a couple more minutes, so I kind of want to open it up to you all. What are you most excited about in 2021? What should we be looking forward to from your companies? Yeah, what's on the horizon?
I'll start. Well, 2021 is a very exciting year. Hopefully we are going to say goodbye to this pandemic and we can move forward, learn a lot of lessons that have occurred from this year, take what is good and continue forward, and what is not as good and put it aside. Just in general, I think, without putting Aleph Farm specifically. The way I started this panel and the way I'm going to finish, I really do believe all of us, by the way, are on the right side of this change. And I think we should continue moving forward. As for Aleph Farm specifically, we are coming out with our full pilot in 2021. We are building the infrastructure and strategies all about our commercial pilots that will be coming out in the end of 2022. So these are a very exciting time for us. We are working nonstop, moving forward, and just continue. As long as we're working and we're moving to our goals, I think just I hope we continue with this with what we're doing. So yeah.
Yeah, for us, I think scale is going to be the word of 2021, which I think is a similar story and similar to what Lee said. I mentioned we started construction on our pilot plant this August. We expect that will be operational by the end of next year. So that's going to be a huge point of focus for our company. And I think, that is really the biggest focus on the technical side for this industry. So lots of exciting stuff, I think, in the year ahead.
Yeah, I think we share similar goals in this, and it's go-to-market strategy, it's regulations, it's scaling, it's producing delicious products. All these things will have to come together in the coming years, and I think everybody is on a similar trajectory when it comes to that. Some people get further ahead, maybe in making the pilot plant, but I think everyone is designing or building these types of things as we speak. So this is it's so exciting. It's going to be such an amazing year after we left this pandemic behind, and it will seem like an ugly dream. And then hopefully we can move forward in the future and start really making a change when it comes to cultivated meat.